Hi, it's Katrina. Number 10. Orcas. In Roman and Etruscan mythology, Orcas was not only god of the underworld, but also the punisher of broken promises. He was usually depicted as a large bearded giant who was very ugly. His role was to torment any soul that was evil and broke their oath. As punisher, he was extremely scary with his mouth open, representing oaths and promises, and perhaps even used as an entranceway to the underworld. He was the god of judgment, and later on was merged with Pluto and Hades and became more evil over time. Orcas originated before the days of Rome in the religion of the Etruscans. The Etruscans flourished long before Rome was even founded, but once the Romans grew and took over, they adopted a lot from them, including their gods. Those who did worship Orcas thought of him as a punisher of evildoers. His duty as god of the underworld was to punish all those who committed foul deeds during their life. Similar to how the name Hades refers to both a god and the underworld, Orcas could also either be the god's name or it could mean land of the dead. For the Etruscans, Orcas wasn't really evil. He was just a giant with a lot of hair who lived in the place where bad people go when they die. As he fell out of favor, the term came to represent demons and other evil or bad entities. From Orcas came the ogres and the orcs, which now refer to flesh-eating monsters from fairy tales. Orcas was once extremely important, but when Rome created their own god of the underworld, Pluto, Orcas took a back seat. He is now mostly remembered in the orcs of Lord of the Rings and ogres from French fairy tales who live on in his honor. Number 9. Yama. Yama is the Hindu god of death, the king of the ancestors, and the ultimate judge of every human being's soul when they reach the afterlife. He's also known under a whole lot of other names, such as King of Ghosts, King of Justice, or simply Death. He is described as majestic with green or black skin, red eyes, and red garments. He carries a noose and a mace and rides on a creepy buffalo. As if that weren't enough, he has 2 dogs with 4 eyes that guard the entrance to his underground kingdom. His responsibility as the god of death was to make a decision based on every person's deeds performed throughout their life. It was up to him to decide just how moral a person was when they were alive. Yama was also a figure in Iranian mythology, Japanese, and Chinese mythology. Anywhere that Buddhism was present, Yama was a god of death. There are a lot of different versions of Yama's story. In almost all of them, he has a sister named Yami, sometimes Yamuna. Yama and his sister are either depicted as the first humans in the world or the people who created the human race. In the story where they are Adam and Eve, Yama is the first person to die and pass into the underworld. This is why he became its ruler. But Yama is quite different from other gods of the underworld in other cultures. He didn't always punish wicked people. Sometimes he lured souls to him just for fun. He did this using 2 great hounds, which coincidentally guard the path through the underworld that a dead person must take to reach Yama. These hounds are very similar to the Cerberus in Greek mythology. When Yama feels like he needs more souls, he sends his hounds to the surface to lure people down to him, where he awaits them in the underworld. Number 8. Ahriman. Ahriman is one of the oldest lords of darkness ever created by humans. While not necessarily the god of the underworld, Ahriman was an evil spirit in Zoroastrianism, one of the first religions in the world. He was the master of chaos, the instigator of human confusion and disappointment, and the celebrator of strife. He existed in direct opposition to a different spirit called Ahura Mazda, who was pure. Ahura Mazda was the king of the gods and the creator of the world, and to oppose him there was the lord of all the demons and evil things in the world, Ahriman. These beliefs lasted all the way until around 330 BC, last adopted by the Achaemenid Empire. But there was a question about how exactly a being like Ahriman, something of pure evil, could exist in a world created by Ahura Mazda, something of pure goodness. Another religion rose up to answer this question, called Zurvanism. In their story, a god called Zorvan gave birth to both Ahriman and Ahura Mazda, thereby solving the issue. This made the existence of evil the result of Ahriman choosing to pursue badness at all costs, while his brother Ahura Mazda was the exact opposite. This was the beginning of religious duality, the fight between good and evil. You might call Ahriman the original Satan, the full and total embodiment of evil. Number 7. Lilith. Lilith first appeared in Jewish mythology as a demon with black hair, who preys on newborn infants and occasionally seduces men and uses them to create hordes of demonic babies. She is pretty terrifying, and throughout the centuries, she's played a lot of different roles in religion. Her name only actually appears a single time in the Hebrew Bible, but she has managed to become Adam's first wife and even the bride of Samael, the demon king. Even before Judaism, demonic creatures like Lilith were endless. The Sumerians had female demons called Lilu, which appeared in the Epic of Gilgamesh. For the Mesopotamians, they had a demoness called Lamashtu. She would torture women as they were giving birth, cause them to have miscarriages, or even steal milk from breastfeeding infants. All of these demons are shockingly similar, and they are all early embodiments of Lilith. Today, a lot of people think of Lilith as Adam's first wife. This was not the case, and according to experts, the Lilith in the Hebrew Bible was simply referring to female demons in general, not a specific person. It was meant to be a plural of the word, just like the Sumerians used. The account of her being Adam's disobedient wife came from a satirical Jewish text written in the Middle Ages, one that was poking fun at biblical figures. It was heretical for its time, written by a man named Ben Sira. He made up the myth about Lilith and Adam, and it was never actually part of any real religious text. Are you familiar with the stories of Lilith? I think I heard about her from True Blood or Lucifer, one of those shows. Number 6. Osiris. Osiris was the god of the underworld in Egyptian mythology. He was also the judge of the human soul, the god of vegetation, and closely connected to death, resurrection, and fertility. The ancient Egyptians thought Osiris was an actual person at one point, an ancient king who died and turned into a god. In the legend, Osiris was murdered by his brother Seth, then brought back to life as a symbol for the Egyptian people that life is indeed eternal. Unlike a lot of the evil lords of the underworld, Osiris wasn't out to harm anyone or to cause chaos. He was more of an inspiration in the afterlife than anything else. Osiris had one very specific job to do in the underworld. He was to weigh the heart of the deceased. The heart was believed to contain the record of every action that a person took in their life. The heart would be weighed against a feather from the goddess named Mat. The feather was a symbol of truth and justice. If the heart was heavier than the feather, it meant the person had not been just in their life. The heart was then fed to Amit the devourer, and the soul was forever lost to darkness. If the scales balanced out, Osiris would welcome the deceased into the afterlife for a never-ending party. Number 5. Hades. Hades is without a doubt the most famous god of the underworld in our modern times. There are hundreds of gods from hundreds of lost religions, all of them ruling over the dead. And yet, because the love of Greek mythology has never died, Hades remains wildly popular and a key figure in pop culture. But here's the real story of Hades. He was the brother of both Zeus and Poseidon and the son of Rhea and Cronus, the Titans. After Hades and his brothers fought together to defeat their parents and rule over the Titans, Zeus, Poseidon, and Hades split up the duties of ruling over the mortal world. Zeus became king of the gods, Poseidon became ruler of the seas, and Hades became lord of the underworld. Like Zeus, Hades was often represented as having a healthy beard. While Hades ruled the underworld, he was not the god of death. That was Thanatos, who would appear to humans to carry them off to the underworld when their time given to them by the fates was up. In Greece, Hades was a feared being. He wasn't necessarily evil, but he did like to collect souls, bring them down to his domain, and then refuse to let them leave. His dominion was segregated from the rest of the world by 5 underground rivers, with the famous river Styx being only one of them. The Greeks often depicted him as having a beard, carrying a pitchfork with 2 prongs, and wearing a spiked helmet-like crown. His helmet was able to turn whoever wore it invisible. He also had a 3-headed dog named Cerberus, who guarded the entrance to the underworld. Number 4. Weiro. Weiro is from Maori mythology and the Lord of Darkness and embodiment of all things that are evil. He made his home deep in the underworld and was believed to be responsible for all bad things that happen to a person. The story of Weiro differed slightly though between the various Maori tribes. The main story was that when people died and their bodies were sent to the underworld, Weiro was there waiting to eat them. He's one of the only gods of the underworld that physically ate dead people, rather than torturing them for all eternity. The reason Weiro ate the bodies was that he became stronger with every person that he ate. The Maori believed that when Weiro finally consumed enough bodies, he would be powerful enough to break free of his prison in the underworld. He would then rise to the surface and eat everything and everybody living on the planet. This is actually one of the reasons why the Maori cremated their dead. They thought that if they burned the bodies of the deceased, Weiro would not be able to eat them, and therefore would not be able to grow more powerful. He couldn't gain strength from ashes, and so this was the only way they could think of to keep him from rising up from deep within the earth and causing Armageddon. Number 3. Tuoni. Tuoni is the Finnish god of death who in old Finnish mythology ruled over the land of the dead called Tuonela. It was ruled by a single family of evil gods. Tuoni was the god of death, Tuonetar was the goddess of death, Tuonin Taito was the daughter of death, and Tuonin Poika was the son of death. For the Vikings, the underworld was a family affair. It's hard to say what Tuoni looked like, but when in his human form, he appears as an old man with 3 fingers on each hand and a cone hat that does not show his face. But each of these gods had their very own responsibility in the underworld. Tuoni would bring the dead down to their domain. His daughter let them pass as the gatekeeper, his wife welcomed them, and his son was the guard who kept watch. But the Vikings took death even further. There were a lot of gods and a lot of steps between dying and getting to the final afterlife. Tuoni worked closely with Kalma, the ruler of graveyards. Kalma took the dead by one hand, Tuoni took them by one foot, and they brought them down to Tuonela. But before a person died, the god Surma was sitting invisible beside their deathbed, waiting to cut their lifeline. She then alerted the other gods that they had a new arrival. Number 2. Vellis. Vellis was known to the Slavic people of Eastern and Central Europe as the king of the underworld and the god of magic and alchemy. Vellis was associated with supernatural powers and known to be the main god worshipped by witches, sorcerers, and all the other kinds of shamans of the ancient world. And for some bizarre reason, he also happened to be worshipped as the protector of livestock by shepherds. Vellis is interesting because he was more like Gandalf than Satan. The Slavs saw him as the king of departed souls, which gave him a strong link to spirits and the natural world. Back before Christianity swept through Europe and destroyed all pagan religions, the Slavic people believed that nature and natural laws governed the world, nothing else. They also thought that priests and priestesses could see beyond the veil of reality to the other side, where Vellis presided over all those who had died already. He wasn't evil in any kind of way, but was more like a godly medium who acted as a guide for dead souls. He was also a guide for those who entered trances to travel via their spirit into alternate dimensions. It wasn't until the Christians came that Vellis got a bad reputation. When Christian ideology seeped into the Slavic world, Vellis became the Lord of Death, a practitioner of evil, and god of the terrifying and awful underworld. They even started depicting him as a menacing god with horns, just like their Christian devil. Number 1. Chibibos. In the legends of the Algonquin, Chibibos was god of the underworld. The Algonquin are the original native people of southern Quebec and eastern Ontario in Canada. He was also the twin brother of the hero Nanaboso. In his origin story, he was a wolf spirit, murdered by water panthers and horned serpents. His murder set off a devastating chain of reactions that resulted in the earth being completely destroyed by a flood. When the flood receded, Nanaboso was upset that he could not bring his brother back to life. To keep him around, at least in some regard, Nanaboso made it so that Chibibos could become ruler of the underworld. In Native American myth, Chibibos isn't evil at all, but rather a kind being who takes care of the land where the dead live, kind of like its humble caretaker. His story does change, varying from tribe to tribe. In some stories, his brother battled the evil water spirits for years to try to get his soul back. In other stories, Chibibos died from falling through the ice. But in the end of every myth, he becomes the protector of souls and ruler of the dead. Thanks for watching! Who is your favorite god or goddess of the underworld? Let me know in the comments below. If you want more amazing mythology videos, check out more from the channel and be sure to hit the subscribe button if you haven't already. See you next time! Bye!